Welcome to Bentonville and Film Festival, and tell us a little bit about your film.
My film is about the amazing Shari Lewis and Lamb Chop. Basically, Shari Lewis to me is a comedian. She was a two-person, three-person, one-man show, one-woman show. She's more than what people think about. There's a whole generation of people who knew Shari from the 50s and 60s, and then she had a show later in the 90s, so there's a whole generation of people in the 90s, but no one really knows the Shari from beginning to end. So I'm hoping that this film sheds a little light, and you get some of Shari's positive messages that were great in the 50s that are good, present day.
Excellent. As a child of the 50s, 60s, yes, I was one of those early ones, and I adored her. Her and Lamb Chop and Charlie Horse and the whole gang were just awesome. Tell me, when she was first getting started, her father did magic. How did she get into what she was doing?
Well, there will be no other Shari. She was raised by her father, who was the official magician of New York City, which no one really knew that existed, Peter Pan the Magic Man, and her mother was the music teacher for the Bronx schools. So she was raised by a magician and a musician, and they always had vaudeville people in their homes. They had ventriloquists and jugglers and all the old vaudeville sort of things. So Shari was a product of that. So she was performing from the time she was 2 and 3 years old, and then she won the Godfrey contest and got her own show, and then the rest is sort of her history.
Well, how did she develop Lamb Chop?
There's so many different stories about how this happens. Like, Shari, throughout her life, had hundreds and hundreds of puppets, but there was something about Lamb Chop that was magical. So the story is she was going on the Captain Kangaroo show, and at that point she was performing as a ventriloquist with those large dummies that were very popular at the time, the big wooden dummies, and apparently Captain Kangaroo or somebody on the show said to her, you're so little and these dummies are so big. Do you have anything that's like smaller? And she had this, she had a variety of puppets, and she went back to Lamb Chop and apparently put Lamb Chop on and felt like this magic, and then went on the show Captain Kangaroo with Lamb Chop, and then her and Lamb Chop and the other characters got their own show after that.
Yeah, I love that, and I understand. I did not remember Dom DeLuise being involved in the show, but I learned that from your movie. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
When Shari had started her shows when she was 17 years old, and then she was 22, she had the Shari Lewis show, which is her big show, and it was sort of a variety show. They had Jerry Orbach and Dom DeLuise and the Wicked Witch of the West. So it was sort of Shari's not just children's show, but a variety show for children. And Dom DeLuise was one of her first guests, and also Dom DeLuise was one of her last guests at Charlie Horse Pizza in the 90s. So they had a great friendship over that period of time.
Tell me a little bit more about Charlie Horse, because he was always out. He was one of my favorites.
Charlie Horse. Rumor has it that Shari says Charlie Horse is the puppet closest to her. Everyone thinks it's Lamb Chop because Shari and Lamb Chop look alike, but apparently it's Charlie Horse who has the personality of Shari.
That's awesome. I know that she was married twice, and the husbands actually had a lot of influence on how she did things. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Well,
her first husband is where she got the name Lewis, though that wasn't his original name either. And she met him when she was 16. She married him very young, and he was involved in this scandal of this game show, and that was kind of the end of their relationship, because apparently Shari's parents were very protective of her career, and they didn't want that to influence her career. And then she met Jeremy Tarcher, who was everything that she had wanted, except that he was unemployed. So she gave him his career as producer. And even though Sherry was the true producer of all her shows, everyone looked to Jeremy for the answers when it was really Sherry who was the one who would give his answers.
I found the date, September 28th, 1963, a week after my 8th birthday when she was canceled, and I remember being brokenhearted about that. How did that affect her?
Wow, I wish I could have interviewed you then. I think Sherry was so successful, and her show was really successful. And she was pretty devastated, but Sherry was never one to be devastated. She was always one to reinvent herself. So she thought this would be an opportunity for her to go to Hollywood and be a serious actress, because she was a singer and a dancer. She wasn't just a puppeteer. So she moved her family out to Hollywood and tried to make it there.
Yeah, I was reminded about all the different shows she was on. Did she have a favorite show that she liked being on?
Well, I think probably Sherry Lewis' show was her last show, which was in the 63, it was canceled, and she wasn't back on television with a regular show until the 90s. So I would say her favorite show would be the Sherry Lewis show or the Lamb Chops Play Along. I think everything she did in between that was to try to get back on television and have her own show.
Yeah, and the Broadway show that she did, that was a one-woman show, or one-and-a-half-woman show, I guess.
Yeah. Well, there were a lot of I think there were like dozens and dozens of performers, like life-size Lamb Chops and life-size Charlie Horse. So it was basically her Lamb Chops Play Along come to life.
Okay. Speaking of life-size, the Fred Astaire dummy that she used for dancing was so cool. How did she come up with that?
I don't know. Sherry came up with amazing things, and apparently from her assistant, that was a really heavy, it was a life-size Fred Astaire, and they traveled along with it, and they'd have it in a big box. And once, apparently, they got stopped by the police, who thought it was like a corpse in the back. So it was always very difficult. They flew with Fred Astaire. Fred Astaire went to Japan. I think so I think it was I don't know how she came up with it, but I love the song that, she always wanted to dance with Fred Astaire, and she got to dance with Fred Astaire.
Yeah, I love that. Now, I know she had cancer fairly early on and beat it, and then it came back. How did that affect her family?
Well, it's very hard for anyone who goes through cancer. But I think Sherry was very pragmatic at the time. The first time she did her treatment, I'm not sure the real details of it, but she just moved on. She didn't live in the woe is me. She did go on Larry King afterwards, it's not in the film, and talk about how doctors treat women. That really, she didn't talk specifically about her cancer, but she did not like the way that she was treated by doctors. So that was sort of her mission. And how did it affect her family? Her daughter and her husband were always very supportive of her. So I think that they just trusted whatever treatment Sherry had was what she wanted.
When she had Mallory, from what I've read and from what I've seen, Mallory really is a chip off the old block, and that she's now touring with Lamb Chop. How much interest did she have, or input did she have as she grew older with Sherry?
Well, yeah, Mallory and Lamb Chop are a TikTok sensation now. They have something like 300 followers on TikTok and a couple hundred followers on Instagram. So from what Mallory tells me, she grew up with Sherry. She traveled with Sherry. She did a lot of the writing. So later in life, she was a writer on the show, and she was a producer. I don't think she had any desire to be a puppeteer. I think just one day it just happened. The story that she tells is that people would say, now that your mom's dead, is Lamb Chop dead also? That's the story she tells. And she felt sort of I don't know, she felt something inside of her to start to make sure that Lamb Chop's legacy lives on.
Sort of obligated, yeah. Wow, that's what I wondered about. In the last days for Shari, I understand her last song was "Hello, Goodbye."
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty. Everyone I interviewed who worked on that show told me the story of how Shari told them that she had cancer. It was the last day of the series that they were doing, and she got everybody together and she said, "Listen, I have to go back to Los Angeles. I have to get treatment." And then they worked and she sung the song. So the amazing thing is that in her assistant Todd's, he had all the stuff in storage, including like little Super 8 tapes and audio cassettes and little video cassettes, and he gave us a lot of it. And we found that moment, like that scene where, so if we didn't have that, it would have been people talking about Shari gathering together, and instead we have this footage, and you could see on the faces of the crew, and Jeremy's there and Mallory's there, like you see this and you see Shari, and Shari's very strategic. I mean, that she chose that song. That was her song.
Well, I think that's a pretty good way to end this. Is there anything you'd like to tell us more about the film and where it's going to be in the future?
I think that this film is not just for people who love Shari. I think there's a lot of messages for people. It's a positive film. It's a film about, Shari's message is really believe in yourself, be the best that you can be. She does have the work hard. She was a hard worker, but she really believed that everyone could be the best they could be and to put your best foot forward. So next week I'm going to London for the international premiere, which is pretty exciting because Shari had a show there. She had a couple shows there that were never shown in America. So that's going to be exciting. And then we have some other festivals, and then I think it will have a broader audience pretty soon.
Do you have a website?
Yeah, ShariandLambChop.com. We have a Facebook page, Shari and Lamb Chop. And you can also follow Mallory. Mallory has your Fab Lamb on TikTok.
That's awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming and talking to us, because I saw this in the list and I went, I have to do this interview. So thank you so much for sitting down with me.